Where's my boat? I heard my own voice crack on the last word, and I didn't even recognize it as mine. I was standing at the edge of my own driveway, staring at the bare concrete slab where the Louise Marie had sat under her blue tarp for the past 4 years, the boat I'd spent 9 years saving for, then 6 months rebuilding plank by plank in my garage, after the man at the Marina told me she wasn't worth fixing. The tarp was gone. The trailer was gone. Even the 2 cinder blocks I used to chock the wheels were gone, like somebody had swept the whole memory clean off my property. That's when my son-in-law, Trent, stepped out onto my porch, car keys still in his hand, and looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger who wandered onto your lawn. He didn't even let me finish asking. I sold it, he said. Kayla needed the money for her salon. I figured you'd be fine with it since you never take it out anymore anyway. I felt something drop out of the bottom of my chest. Not my heart exactly, lower than that, somewhere I didn't have a name for. He had just sold the last thing I owned that still smelled like my wife's sunscreen and cheap drugstore perfume, the boat she used to sit on the bow of, with her feet dangling over the water, while I fished for nothing in particular, just so I could watch her laugh at the pelicans. $22,000. That's what he told me, standing right there on my own front steps, like it was a number that could explain away 9 years of Saturday mornings spent scraping fiberglass with my bare hands. What he didn't understand, what he had no possible way of understanding, was that in that exact moment, he'd lost something a whole lot more valuable to him than $22,000. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Roger Callahan. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 31 years working as a machinist at a marine engine plant outside Pensacola, Florida. I know how metal bends before it breaks. I know how to read stress in something long before it snaps. What I did not know, not until that particular Tuesday afternoon in April, was that a man could raise a daughter with everything he had in him, watch her marry a fella he had his doubts about from the very first handshake, and still end up robbed blind in his own driveway by that same fella without so much as a phone call first. If you'd have told me a month before that Tuesday that my own son-in-law would do something like that to me, I'd have laughed you right off my porch. That's the part that still sits wrong in my stomach, if I'm being honest with you. Not the money. The disbelief. 7 years ago, my wife Patricia passed from ovarian cancer. It took her slow, the way that particular kind does, so you get all the time in the world to lose someone while they're still sitting in the recliner across from you, asking if you remembered to feed the dog. Before she got sick, we used to sit out on that boat most Sunday evenings, just drifting on the bay behind our house, no fishing rods, even in the water half the time. We used to talk about running the boat all the way down through the Keys once I finally retired. Patricia used to say she wanted to anchor off every sandbar between here and Key West and eat cheap gas station shrimp on all of them. Retirement came for me 2 years after she passed. She never got to see a single one of those sandbars. For almost a decade before that, I'd been quietly setting money aside for a boat worth having. No new truck for me, no fancy fishing trips with the boys from the plant. Every extra dollar went into a coffee can in my closet that I labeled, in Patricia's handwriting actually, because she started it before she got too sick to write much of anything. The words just said, "someday." My neighbors used to razz me pretty good when I finally hauled home a beat-up 31-foot Bertram that had been sitting in some fella's backyard for 6 years, rotting under a blue tarp. They didn't get it. That old hull wasn't a purchase. It was a promise I still owed a woman who wasn't around anymore to collect on it. I spent 6 months rebuilding her from the inside out. New transom, new stringers, an engine I rebuilt myself on a folding table in my garage with grease, worked so deep into my knuckles it took a week to get it all out. I kept Patricia's old visor clipped above the helm. Her faded beach towel stayed folded on the bench seat where she used to sit. I bolted a little brass plate near the wheel that just said Louise Marie, her middle name, because Patricia always thought Patricia was too plain a name for a boat. Some evenings after supper, I'd walk out there just to sit behind the wheel for an hour, not going anywhere, just imagining the whole coastline stretched out ahead of me. 4 days before everything came apart, my brother Dale called and asked if I wanted to come stay with him and his wife up in Birmingham for his 65th birthday. 4 days, 5 tops. Before I left, I handed my spare house key to my daughter Kayla, since she and Trent only lived about 15 minutes away. "Just keep an eye on things," I told her. "Water the ferns, grab the mail." She said, "Course, Dad. Don't even think about it." I had no earthly idea those 4 words would end up costing me the one thing I had left of her mother. When I pulled back into my own driveway that Tuesday, I felt something was wrong before my eyes even caught up with what my gut already knew. The concrete slab was bare. I told myself maybe Kayla had the trailer moved around back for some reason. I walked around. Nothing. I checked the side yard, the storage shed, even the neighbor's carport, out of pure desperation. Panic climbed straight up my spine before my brain had even finished processing what was happening. I ran inside television, my late father's tools, Patricia's jewelry box, all of it sitting right where I'd left it. The only thing missing in my entire house, my entire life, was the one thing that mattered most. I called Kayla. There was a long stretch of dead air on the line first, and then she said, real quiet, "Dad, you should probably come by the house. Trent needs to talk to you." I drove over there with my hands shaking on the wheel the whole way, and that's exactly when I found Trent standing on my own porch because apparently he'd let himself in with the spare key while I was gone, telling me, plain as you please, that he'd sold my boat. "You what?" I said. The words barely made it out of my mouth. "Kayla needed 22 grand to get the salon lease signed," he said. "That old boat's just been sitting there for years, man. I figured it was basically doing nothing for anybody." Kayla came out behind him then, arms crossed, refusing to look me straight in the eye. "I've been talking about this salon for 2 years, Dad," she said, like that was supposed to settle the matter. "It's not just a boat," I told her, and my voice came out a whole lot smaller than I meant it to. "It's the last thing I've got of your mother's dream." "Whatever, Dad," Trent said, actually rolling his eyes at me. "You weren't even using it. When's the last time you even took it out on the water?" "I was gone 4 days, I said. "You'll live," he said. I want to tell you I said something strong in that moment, something a man's supposed to say when somebody guts him like that. I didn't. I just stood there on my own porch like a stranger in my own life. Kayla finally spoke up, quiet, staring at her shoes. "We needed the money, Dad." "No," I told her. "You wanted it." Neither one of them had an answer for that. My neighbor across the street was out watering her hedges, pretending real hard not to be listening. Nobody said a single word for what felt like a full minute. Somehow that silence hurt worse than any shouting could have. I walked past both of them into my own garage without another word, because I needed somewhere to put my hands that wasn't around anybody's throat. Trent followed me in there, saying, "Come on, man, don't be like this," like I was the unreasonable one in the whole situation. I opened up my old toolbox and found the spiral notebook, where I'd logged every single receipt from rebuilding that boat, 9 years of saving, 6 months of labor, hundreds of quiet evenings out there, with a wrench in my hand and my wife's memory keeping me company. For about 2 seconds, I swear I saw something soften in Trent's face. Then Kayla hollered from the driveway that they were going to be late meeting somebody about paint colors for the salon, and whatever had softened in him hardened right back up. "Life goes on, Roger," he said. First time in 3 years of marriage he'd ever called me by my first name instead of Dad or Mr. Callahan, and they left. I sat alone in that garage until it got dark outside. Wasn't angry by then, just hollowed out. The house felt too big around me, too quiet. Patricia's picture sat on my workbench, smiling like she hadn't heard a word of it. I finally got her running right, I whispered at the photograph. And now she's gone. That hurt worse than I expected it to. Not the money. The fact that somebody I helped raise looked at my dream and decided it was his to cash in without so much as a phone call. If you've ever stood in a room where the person who's supposed to protect you looks straight through you like you're furniture instead, you already know exactly what that particular silence feels like. It doesn't come in loud. It just sits down on your chest and stays there. Around 7 that evening, I called my insurance agent, hoping there was some kind of fast fix for all this. She told me that since Trent had a legal key and access to the property, this might end up being more of a civil dispute than a straightforward theft case. Then I called the Escambia County Sheriff's Office anyway. The deputy who came out was polite, patient, and about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. "If your son-in-law had permission to be on the property," he said, real careful, "this might need to go through a civil attorney instead of us." Civil attorney, property dispute. None of those words belonged anywhere near a boat with my dead wife's name bolted to the dash. At 8:40 that night, my phone rang. The screen showed a business name I didn't recognize, Gulf Coast Marine Brokers. I almost let it go to voicemail out of sheer exhaustion. Instead, I picked up. "This is Roger," I said. "Mr. Callahan," a voice said, sounding nervous right out of the gate. "My name's Danny. I'm the sales manager over here. I'm calling about the Bertram." My stomach dropped clean through the floor. "I already know," I said, flat. There was a long pause on his end. Sir, he said, dropping his voice almost to a whisper. There's something in this boat you're going to want to see for yourself. I frowned so hard my jaw ached. I cleared that boat out before I left town, I told him. There shouldn't be a thing left on board. It was hidden, he said. Real well hidden. Hidden, I repeated back at him, like the word might make more sense the second time. I think you need to come down here, he said. Tonight, if you can. I don't remember much of that drive. I remember my knuckles going white around the wheel, every red light on Highway 98 feeling like it lasted an hour. Danny's voice kept looping in my head. You left something in this boat and none of it made a lick of sense to me. The brokerage sat back off the road behind a row of boat trailers, the office lights already dimmed down for closing. Danny met me at the door before I'd even shut my engine off. He looked younger than I'd pictured on the phone, maybe mid-30s, and clearly not comfortable in his own skin right then. Mr. Callahan, he said, I'm real sorry about all this. Can I see my boat? I asked him. In a minute, he said. There's something you need to see first. He walked me through the service bay, and there she sat under the fluorescent lights, the Louise Marie, hull polished up nicer than I'd seen her in years. Seeing her again nearly stopped my heart in my chest. Patricia's old visor still hung right where I'd clipped it. The brass nameplate still gleamed under the shop lights. I set my hand flat against the hull before I could even stop myself. I'm sorry, I whispered at her, like she could somehow hear me. Two mechanics stood off near the back wall. One of them, an older guy with a gray mustache and forearms like tree trunks, walked over. You Roger? He asked. I nodded. You did some beautiful work on this old girl, he said. I managed a weak smile and thanked him. We about missed it, he said. Missed what? I asked. The compartment, he said. Come on. We climbed aboard together. The old mechanic knelt down by the bait well, pulled up a section of the deck liner I'd walked over 1,000 times in 6 months of restoring that boat and never once noticed was loose. Underneath was a small waterproof case, sealed tight. I've owned this boat for 4 years, I said. I had no idea that was under there. Danny knelt down and worked the latches. Had to cut the seal to get it open, he said, and lifted the lid slow. For a second, none of us said a single word. The first thing I saw was a plastic sleeve, and inside it, a folded piece of notebook paper in handwriting I would have known anywhere on this earth, because I'd been reading grocery lists in that same handwriting for 38 years of marriage. Across the top, just one word. Roger. My heart flat out stopped in my chest. I reached in with hands that wouldn't hold still. Underneath the letter was a small leather-bound logbook, a folded nautical chart of the Florida Keys gone soft at the creases, a handful of photographs curling at the edges, and beneath all of it, a manila envelope sealed with a strip of packing tape and written across the front in Patricia's careful hand, for when you're finally ready. I couldn't breathe. Danny and the mechanic stepped back out onto the dock and left me alone with all of it. The only sound left in that bay was the water lapping quiet against the hull. I opened the logbook first. Page after page in her handwriting, marinas, anchorages, little waterfront diners circled in pen. Next to almost every stop, she'd written a note, sometimes to herself, sometimes I think to me. Best key lime pie on the whole Gulf Coast, right here. Roger would love this lighthouse. Watch the sunset from this exact spot. Don't let him rush past it. Halfway through, I had to stop reading because the words had gone blurry on me. Patricia had planned this whole route years before her diagnosis ever came, and she never once stopped believing we'd run it together. I just hadn't known she'd left proof of that belief, hidden 6 inches under my own bait well the whole time. If you've ever found something a person you loved left behind for you, something they never got the chance to hand you themselves, you already know there's no bracing yourself for a thing like that. It shows up exactly when it wants to, ready or not. A soft knock came from the dock. Danny stood there, looking like he didn't want to interrupt but had to. Sorry, he said. I wiped my eyes and asked him how in the world they'd even found that compartment in the first place. Our inspection guy noticed the deck sounded hollow under there, he said. We figure whoever built that liner years back tucked it in on purpose. Then we found all this. He nodded toward the logbook in my lap. Figured it belonged to somebody who cared a whole lot about this boat. You'd be right, I told him. Can I ask you something? Why didn't the buyer just take her and drive off already? Once we found that hidden compartment, he said, we were legally obligated to stop everything. State law here says we have to report and return any personal property found in a vessel before we can finalize a sale. So the paperwork never actually got finished. So it's still mine, I said. As far as we're concerned right now, yes, sir, he said. But there's something else you should know, Mr. Callahan. Your son-in-law was never listed as an owner on this title. Everything on file shows sole ownership under your name. That's me, I said. Exactly, he said. He presented paperwork with what looked like your signature authorizing the sale. I never signed a single thing, I told him. His face went serious real quick. I was afraid you'd say that, he said. A chill ran straight down through me. Forgery. The words settled into my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. My son-in-law hadn't just betrayed my trust. He'd potentially broken the law doing it. I don't want him arrested, I told Danny, and I meant it even as it came out of my mouth. I understand, he said, gentle about it, but we do have obligations here too, including to the buyer. Fella put down a $5,000 deposit. He's not happy, understandably. We've frozen the whole transaction until this gets sorted. So she's still mine, I said again, needing to hear it a second time. As far as we're concerned, yes, Danny said. I closed my eyes right there in the captain's chair, and for the first time all day, I actually let myself breathe. The next morning I sat across a desk from an attorney named Marjorie Kessler, a woman who'd spent nearly 3 decades untangling exactly this kind of family mess for people who never thought it would happen to them. She listened without cutting in once, took her notes, and when I finished talking, she set her pen down and looked at me steady. Roger, I told her before she could even ask, I don't want revenge. I just want my boat back. I think you'll get that, she said. And Trent, that part depends on what you decide to do next. I don't follow, I told her. You've got every legal right to pursue this criminally, she said. Forgery alone is a felony in this state. I looked down at the floor for a minute. He's still my daughter's husband, I said, whatever else he is. She didn't argue with that. She just asked me one question. What would Patricia have wanted? I already knew the answer before she'd even finished asking it. She'd have wanted accountability, not destruction. Marjorie smiled just a little, like she'd expected exactly that out of me. Then let's get your boat back first, she said. And after that, we give him one real chance to tell the truth before the law does it for him. Walking back to my truck, my phone rang. Kayla. I watched her name flash up on the screen a good long while before I answered it. Dad, she said, voice already shaking, I think we might have a problem. I stood in that parking lot watching a couple of grackles fighting over a dropped French fry, and it struck me how strange it is that the whole world just keeps right on turning even when yours has stopped dead in the water. What kind of problem? I asked, calm as I could manage. The brokerage called Trent, she said. They're saying the sale's on hold. I'd imagine they are, I told her. They're saying he wasn't allowed to sell it, she said. They're correct, I said. Silence stretched out long on the line. For the first time since this whole mess started, my daughter actually sounded scared. Dad, can we talk? She asked. Not today, I said, and I ended the call before she could offer me some excuse I wasn't ready to hear yet. Wasn't that I hated her, I just wasn't ready. Over the next several days, casseroles started showing up on my porch, the way they do down here when folks sense something's happened without anybody actually saying what. My next-door neighbor Earl came by one afternoon carrying 2 spinning rods. You busy? He asked. I told him I suppose not. Good. Let's go catch absolutely nothing, he said. And for the first time in a solid week, I actually laughed. A couple hours later, we sat on a dock down by the bayou watching pelicans dive for bait fish, and Earl finally spoke up out of nowhere. My son stole from me once, he said. I looked over at him, surprised as anything. Most folks don't know that about us, he said. Spent almost 8 years trying to punish him for it. Didn't do a lick of good. I asked him what did work. I stopped trying to win, he said. Had to let him lose it all on his own. That stayed with me a long while after we packed up our gear. Meanwhile, Kayla kept calling, sometimes twice a day. I let most of it ring on through. Marjorie told me the buyer had lawyered up and wanted his full deposit back, that the brokerage agreed he was owed every dime, and that Trent had already spent nearly all the money and had no way to make it right on his own. On Friday, my niece Renata called me. She hesitated a good long moment before telling me she'd run into Kayla at a nail salon downtown, showing off pictures of the boat to the other women in the waiting chairs, telling them, and I'm quoting her here, that sometimes old men just don't know what's good for their own money anymore. I sat with that a while, Not angry exactly, understanding maybe for the first real time that none of this had ever actually been about any salon at all. That evening, Trent showed up at my door, looking like he'd aged about 5 years in 1 week, dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, hadn't shaved. "I know you don't want to see me," he said. I didn't answer that one way or the other, just asked him what he needed. "They want the deposit money back," he said. "I know," I told him. "I can't pay it," he said. "I already gave Kayla most of it for the lease." "How much?" I asked. 19,000, he said. Rest went to a work truck I needed for the salon build-out. "And the salon?" I asked. "Lease fell through," he admitted. "Landlord backed out over some zoning thing." I looked at him a long while. "I've got one question," I said. He nodded eager, like a question was something he could survive standing up. "When you sold that boat," I said, "did it once cross your mind to call me first?" His mouth opened, then shut again. Finally he whispered, "No." That answer hurt worse than every other thing put together. Not because he'd said it, because he'd told me the truth for once. "I don't know what happened to me," he said quiet. "I do," I told him. "You stopped seeing me as your wife's father. You started seeing me as an obstacle standing between you and a number." His eyes filled up. "I never meant," he started. "I believe you," I told him. "You never meant for it to get this bad, but you meant to sell my dream regardless." He didn't have a single thing left to argue with after that. Monday morning, Marjorie called before I'd even finished my coffee. "Good news," she said. "The brokerage's internal review came back. They've officially voided the sale." "My boat's still mine," I said. "It is," she said. "But there's one more thing. The buyer wants to meet you." "Why?" I asked. "He wouldn't say exactly," she said. "Just that after hearing the whole story from Danny, there's something he wants to tell you himself." At 2 that afternoon, I sat down across from a man about my own age, silver hair, sun-worn hands, wearing a faded cap from some tugboat outfit out of Mobile. His name was Curtis Boone. He stood the second I walked in. "I owe you an apology," he said before I'd even sat down. "For what?" I asked. "I almost bought your boat right out from under you," he said. "Been hunting for an old Bertram for the better part of a year. When your son-in-law brought her in, I about fell in love with her on the spot. Whoever restored that hull cared about it deep." "That was me," I told him. When the brokerage called and laid out the whole story, he said, "I wasn't angry, I was disappointed, not because I lost the boat, because I realized somebody had stolen another old man's last dream right out from under him, and that just sat wrong with me." Those words hit harder than I expected them to. A total stranger understood something my own daughter hadn't managed to yet. Curtis slid a small photograph across the table toward me. "Think this belongs to you," he said. It was Patricia, standing on the bow of the boat not long after I'd bought her. Laughing, sunglasses pushed up in her hair, a chart folded under one arm. I'd wondered for weeks where that particular photo had gotten off to. "My wife passed 3 years back," Curtis said quiet. "Heart." I told him I was sorry to hear that. "So am I," he said. "We were supposed to run down to the Keys together, just like your logbook there, I'd guess." Patricia and I had said almost that exact same thing about our own trip, more times than I could count. Grief recognizes its own kind, turns out, no matter whose name is on the boat. He shook my hand before he left. "I hope you finish that trip," he said. That night, I finally sat down with Patricia's sealed envelope. I'd carried it around in my jacket pocket for 2 straight days, scared to open it, scared it would feel like losing her all over again. I peeled back the tape with my thumb. "My dearest Roger," it began. "If you're reading this, then one of 2 things has happened. Either we finally made it out on that long trip and you're teasing me right now for packing too many pairs of shoes, or I'm not sitting next to you anymore to see it." I laughed clean through tears. That was so exactly her. She always did pack too many shoes. "Don't let that house swallow you whole," she'd written. "I know you, Roger. You'll tell yourself staying put is how you honor me. But memories don't live in walls, or in a driveway, or in a boat sitting under a tarp collecting dust. They travel along with the people who keep on loving." I had to stop reading for a minute right there. 7 years, and I'd barely made it past 3 counties in any direction. Not because I couldn't, because I hadn't wanted to leave the places that still held her. "Take that trip," she'd written. "Watch a sunrise somewhere you've never once been. Eat bad diner food at some gas station marina. Stop at every little roadside historical marker, even the boring ones nobody else cares about. Talk to strangers on the docks. They'll turn into stories later on. I promise you. Then I hit the paragraph that changed something in me for good. If somebody ever hurts you after I'm gone, promise me one thing. Don't let bitterness be the last gift they leave sitting in your heart. Hold people accountable, Roger. Protect what's yours. But don't go making a home out of anger. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing ever happened. It's refusing to let somebody else's worst decision get to define the rest of your life. I read that sentence maybe 4 times over, truer each time than the last. The final page held just a short paragraph. When you're finally out there on the water, talk to me sometimes. I won't answer back the way I used to, but I believe you'll know I'm listening anyway. I folded that letter up careful. For the first time since Trent's confession on my own porch, I didn't feel eaten alive by betrayal anymore. I missed my wife more in that moment than I had in years. But somehow, I also felt closer to her than I had in just as long. If you've ever lost somebody who left behind a piece of themselves for the exact moment you'd need it most, you know there's no preparing for that either. It just finds you when it's ready to. The next morning, Kayla called again. "Can I come by?" she asked. "Why?" I asked her. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Trent lied to me." "About what?" I asked. "The salon," she said. "The landlord never backed out over zoning. There was never a real lease to begin with. He made the whole thing up." I felt my stomach clench right back up. "Then where'd the money go?" I asked. "He gave most of it to some guy he knows from work," she said. "For a truck that doesn't even run. I think he got scammed, Dad. I think he panicked and lied to me to cover for how stupid it was." The whole picture was coming clear now. This had never once been about a salon. It never had been from the very start. It had only ever been about a man wanting something and grabbing for the fastest way to get it. Before she hung up, Kayla asked me one more question, small and quiet. "If you were me," she said, struggling to even get it out, "is there any way to fix this?" I looked over at Patricia's letter, still sitting open on my kitchen table. "You don't start by figuring out how to fix the money," I told her. "You start by fixing the man who thought stealing from his own wife's father was something he could just walk away from." The line went quiet a long moment. For the first time, I believed she'd actually heard me. For several days after that, neither one of them called at all. Then Marjorie phoned with an update. "Everything's settled up," she said. "The boat's fully yours, clear title, nothing hanging over it." "I can bring her home?" I asked. "You can," she said. "One more thing, though." Kayla went down to the brokerage herself, demanding they hand over the deposit money. They told her the sale had already been voided. She wasn't happy about that news, threatened to sue the whole outfit. "Some folks never do stop digging," I said, "even after they've already fallen clean into the hole." That afternoon I drove out to the brokerage myself. The service crew greeted me like an old friend. "Told you he'd come back for her," one of the mechanics called out, giving the hull a friendly slap. Danny walked over with a thick folder, had me sign the final release, then dropped the keys into my hand. "Welcome home," he said. I climbed up into the captain's chair. Everything smelled exactly the way I'd left it. Patricia's visor still clipped over the wheel, her towel still folded on the bench, her photograph tucked safe in the logbook. I put both hands on the wheel and whispered, "I'm coming. Just not today." I wanted the first mile of that trip to start out with a peaceful heart, not one still weighed down under all this unfinished business. When I pulled into my own driveway, Trent's truck was already sitting out front. He was on my porch steps, alone, no Kayla. "Heard you got her back," he said as I climbed down. "I did," I told him. "Looks good," he said. "Always did," I answered. Neither one of us moved for a second. Then he just said it plain. "Kayla and I are taking a break. She moved back in with her mother this morning." He laughed once, bitter about it. Guess I wasn't worth much to her without $22,000 sitting in the bank. The humor fell flat between us. He looked wore clean out, not the tired body kind. The other kind. "Come on inside," I told him. We sat at the same kitchen table where he'd first admitted what he'd done. The silence between us felt different this time around. Before, it had been thick with his arrogance. Now it carried something closer to shame. And shame, I've come to learn, is at least an honest thing to sit with. "I found the receipts," he said, staring down into his coffee. "The truck never existed. Guy took the money and blocked my number that same night." "You got scammed," I said. "I sold your dream," he said, "for absolutely nothing at all. No father-in-law wants to hear a thing like that. No father-in-law wants it to be true either." He reached into his jacket and set a small velvet box down on the table. "My watch?" he said. Selling it. My guns too. Whatever it takes. He looked up at me. I'm paying every dollar of that deposit back myself. Going to take me a couple years probably, but I already started making calls. For the first time in weeks, I saw something in him worth recognizing, not because he'd fixed a single thing yet, but because he'd finally quit hunting for the easy way out. There's something else you should know, he said. It wasn't only my idea. What do you mean? I asked. I complained first, he admitted. About money. Everybody our age seems to have more than we do. He looked around my plain kitchen. You never cared about stuff like that. I did care, I told him, just about the right things. Kayla used to say, he went on. Your boat's just sitting there rotting. He'll never even miss it. I should have walked away right then. Wanted an easy answer instead. So I turned into exactly the kind of man I always swore I'd never be. Those words stung, but they came out honest. And honest hurts a whole lot less than pretty lies do, eventually. I got up, walked into the front room, came back holding an old photo off the mantel. Trent, at maybe 9 years old, standing next to Kayla at her birthday party, holding a fishing rod nearly as tall as he was, grinning ear to ear. I'd forgotten I even had that one. It was from years back, before he and Kayla were even a couple, back when his own daddy used to bring him around the neighborhood cookouts. Remember this? I asked him. He smiled just a little. You taught me to cast that same afternoon, he said, right off your old dock. I remember, I told him. You didn't have to, he said. I wasn't even your kid yet. Didn't matter, I said. Any boy who wants to learn deserves somebody willing to teach him. He went quiet a second. You know what I remember most? He asked. I shook my head. After that, every time I came around, he said, you always let me steer coming back into the dock. I laughed. You always about ran us into the pilings, I said. Every single time, he said, and we both laughed for the first time in what felt like a solid month. Then he did something I didn't see coming. He stood up, came around the table, and hugged me. Not some quick, stiff, grown man handshake hug. He held on the way a scared kid does. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking clean in half. I didn't just sell your boat. I sold every bit of trust you ever gave me a chance to earn. I know, I said. I can't ask you to forgive me, he said. Haven't earned that. But I want to. And I'll spend as long as it takes proving I'm somebody different. I believed he meant it right then. Whether he could actually live it out day after day, only time was going to tell me that for sure. A week later, Marjorie called one last time. Everything's officially closed out, she said. No more legal exposure on either side. I've practiced law going on 30 years, she added. Seen plenty of families torn apart over a whole lot less than this. I looked out my kitchen window while she talked. Trent was out in my driveway buffing wax into the hull without anybody asking him to, elbow grease up both arms. He looked up and gave me a wave. I waved back. I hope he doesn't waste this second chance, Marjorie said before she hung up. So do I told her. Late summer came around, and my driveway looked different than it had in years. Not because I'd bought a single new thing, but because every Saturday morning, before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, Trent was already out there. Never once showed up empty-handed. One week it was fresh zincs for the hull, next week new fuel lines, then a spare prop he'd found secondhand for a steel. None of it cost much. That was never really the point of any of it anyway. He was showing up week after week without being asked and without fishing for a single word of praise. That's a thing money flat out cannot buy back once it's been spent. One bright Saturday morning he crawled out from under the engine cover, grease striped clean across his forehead. Think that's the last leak, he said. You said that 3 Saturdays running now, I told him. I know, he said. Mean it this time, though. Old boats always got one more surprise hiding in them somewhere, I told him. Guess that's true of families too, he said, and I looked over at him and realized he wasn't joking one bit anymore. He'd finally figured out that trust doesn't come back from one good apology. It gets rebuilt one honest Saturday at a time, same as anything worth having. One afternoon, polishing the brass fittings together, he asked me, Why didn't you have me arrested, Roger? I kept right on wiping down that brass a few seconds before I answered him. Because prison would have only taught you to hate me for it, I said. What'd you want to teach me instead? He asked. Responsibility, I told him. I deserved consequences, he said. You got them, I said. You lost your marriage, near enough. Lost something even bigger than that, too. What's that? He asked. I looked him dead in the eye. You lost yourself for a while there. He lowered his head. I know, he said quiet. A month after that, a small insurance check showed up in the mail, covering some minor hull repairs the brokerage had made while she sat in their care. Not much money. Just enough to cover fuel for a good long haul. Patricia always used to say the universe has a funny sense of timing about things. Maybe she was right about that too. That night, I spread the real paper chart out across my kitchen table, not some screen, the actual folded chart with the soft creases in it, and traced the whole route we'd talked about for years. Down through Apalachicola, around Tampa Bay, all the way to Key West and back up the other side. Near enough 1,100 miles of coastline, all told. I could almost hear Patricia laughing right there beside me. You're trying to see the whole Gulf Coast in one trip again, aren't you? She'd have said. Maybe I was at that. 2 days before I planned to shove off, Kayla stopped by with a small cardboard box. Found this cleaning out the garage at Mom's old place, she said. Inside were dozens of old photographs, Patricia teaching her to swim off the dock, our first real family trip down to the Keys back when Kayla was maybe 7, Christmas mornings, birthday parties. One caught my eye straight off. Patricia, standing beside a lighthouse somewhere down near Marathon. When was this taken? I asked. I was little, Kayla said. We rented a houseboat for one weekend, remember? I'd near about forgotten. Patricia hadn't. On the back, in her own hand, she'd written, "One day we'll run this whole coast together, just the two of us." I slipped that photograph right into the logbook where it belonged. The morning I finally shoved off, a few neighbors gathered down by the dock to see me on my way. Earl showed up with 2 travel mugs of black coffee. "Figured you'd need this," he said. "I probably will," I told him. "Take your time out there," he said, and I told him I fully intended to. Marjorie stopped by on her way into the office, smiling at the boat. "You finally made it happen," she said. "Thanks to a good lawyer," I told her. "No," she said, shaking her head at me. "Thanks to a patient father." Before I could answer her, another truck pulled up. Trent got out, looking nervous, and walked over slow. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. I already knew what it was before he even got the words out. "Would it be all right," he asked, "if I came along for part of the trip? Just a little ways?" I looked over toward the empty spot on that bench seat, the one that should have had Patricia sitting in it, then back at him. "How long?" I asked. "Just a few days," he said. "Far as Apalachicola, maybe." "Your mother-in-law always wanted to see that stretch of coast," I told him. "Found it written down in one of her old logbook pages." His eyes filled up a little. "I found that same page," he said, "reading through it last week." "Pack a bag then," I told him, and his whole face lit up like something that had been switched back on after a long time sitting dark. He hugged me before I even had the chance to change my mind about any of it. 3 days later, somewhere off that same stretch of coastline Patricia had circled years before in blue ink, we cut the engine and just drifted a while to watch the sun go down over the water. The old motor ticked and cooled behind us in the evening breeze. "It's beautiful out here," Trent said. "Glad you came along," I told him, and meant every word of it. "One day," he said after a while, "I'd like to bring my own kids out this way, if I ever get the chance at that." "When that day comes," I told him, resting a hand on his shoulder, "you teach them one thing and one thing only." "What's that?" he asked. "Dreams don't get measured by what they cost you," I said. "They get measured by what they're worth to you. And you never let money talk you into believing somebody else's dream is yours to sell out from under them." "I won't," he said. "I believe you," I told him. And for the first time in a long, long while, I actually meant every word of that too. As the sun dropped down behind the tree line, I looked out over all that open water and understood something Patricia had been trying to tell me for years, without ever quite saying it in so many words. Memories don't live inside a house, or a garage, or under a blue tarp collecting dust. They travel right along with the people who keep on loving you. And sometimes the longest stretch of water you'll ever cross only opens up once you've finally learned how to let somebody earn their way back. Here's the thing I keep coming back around to, and I want to be straight with you about it. The mistake most folks make watching a story like this one is thinking the lesson sits inside the boat, or the money, or even inside Trent himself. It doesn't. The lesson is that trust takes years and years to build up, and only a handful of careless seconds to spend clean away. And the people we love the most are exactly the ones with the power to cost us the most, precisely because we're the ones who let our guard all the way down for them in the first place. So, here's something small you can actually go and do today. If any piece of this story landed with you, go on and call whoever it is you've been putting off a hard conversation with. Not to accuse them of a single thing, just to ask them one honest question, and this time actually sit still long enough to hear the answer. And here's something to sit with a little longer than that. Is there somebody in your own life you've been quietly punishing instead of just letting them lose it all on their own, the way they truly need to? I'd genuinely like to know what you make of Trent's choices in this story. So go on and drop a 1, a 2, or a 3 down in the comments right now. 1, if you think he deserved to lose everything, and then some. 2, if you think what happened to him already counted as punishment enough. 3, if you're still sitting somewhere in between, same as I was for a good long while myself. And tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is right there where you're at. I always do love seeing just how far these stories manage to travel. And if any part of this reminded you of something you've actually lived through yourself, whether you were the one who got hurt or the one who did the hurting, I'd honestly like to hear that story too, if you're ever willing to share it with me. If stories like this one mean something to you, stick around here with me a while longer, because there's a whole lot more road left to travel together yet.